was a documentary created by Citizens United, a nonprofit corporation designed to be a feature-length attack on Hillary Clinton. The movie sparked more than just political controversy during the 2008 election. It also led to a landmark United States Supreme Court case about the regulation of campaign spending by corporations. Section 441B of the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002 prohibited corporations from publicly advocating for or against a candidate before an election. The act authorized the Federal Election Commission to enforce this prohibition. Citizens United requested a preliminary injunction against the Federal Election Commission in an attempt to prevent the commission from applying the act to Hillary the movie. The nonprofit argued that the act was an unconstitutional restriction on political speech by corporations, and it therefore violated the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. The district court denied the injunction, relying on precedent that had previously upheld Section 441B as constitutional. Using the special appellate procedures under the Act, Citizens United skipped the Court of Appeals and petitioned directly to the United States Supreme Court. The issue before the Supreme Court was whether restrictions on independent expenditures by corporations to expressly advocate for or against a political candidate are constitutional under the First Amendment's freedom of speech protections. The court held that corporations have the right to freedom of political speech and that the government may not restrict independent political expenditures based on the speaker's corporate identity. Previously, in Buckley v. Vallejo in 1976, the court had indicated that the First Amendment does not allow political speech restrictions based on a speaker's corporate identity. In that case, the court drew a distinction between pocket-to-pocket campaign contributions, which go from a corporation directly to a political candidate, and independent expenditures, which support a particular candidate but don't directly go into the candidate's pocket. The Buckley court held that statutory limits on corporate contributions are generally constitutional, but restrictions on independent expenditures aren't. But the court took a different tack in Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce in 1990. In that case, the court found that corporate wealth corrupts the political process, and that corporations' independent expenditures to advocate for or against a political candidate can be constitutionally restricted. Writing for a 5-4 majority, Justice Kennedy determined that Austin went too far. Millions of corporations, he noted, don't have access to large amounts of wealth to spend on political campaigns. Kennedy further reasoned that political speech, even from a corporation, is indispensable to a well-functioning democracy. Additionally, the court found no evidence that corporate speech promotes corruption of the political process. Even if evidence of corruption existed, the government's interest in preventing corruption doesn't outweigh the corporation's constitutionally protected interest in free speech. The court overruled Austin and held that Section 441B can't constitutionally restrict independent expenditures by corporations to support or oppose a political candidate. The court reversed the district court's ruling on the constitutionality of Section 441B and remanded the case back to the district court. Chief Justice Roberts filed a concurring opinion, arguing that principles of stare decisis didn't justify continued adherence to Austin. Justice Stevens wrote an opinion dissenting in part and concurring in part, stating that there is a serious need to limit corporate political speech. Stevens argued that the majority took a radical departure from established First Amendment law. According to Stevens, the framers were suspicious of corporations and intentionally gave corporations less political speech protections than individuals. The framers considered unlimited corporate speech and large pools of corporate wealth to be a lethal combination that would corrupt the democratic process.
And I can't find a seconder usually when I propose this, but I don't care. I don't need a seconder. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this can pick a number, get online, kiss my ass.
Somebody Black Hawk pilot. Black Hawk pilot.
And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a hero. I need someone who'll get up before dawn and work all day in the worst of places, the jungles, the deserts, far out at sea. So God made a soldier. God said, I need someone who'll eat supper after a long day at work and help with homework and spend time with children and to teach the next generation on the importance of teamwork and sportsmanship. So God made a husband, a father, and a coach. I need somebody strong enough to carry a weapon, yet wise enough to know there are times when it's better not to use it. So God made a leader.
Irene, let's do it.
God said, I need someone who can shoot straight, soar above the clouds, never waver. Somebody who knows what it's like to serve in the company of heroes, willing to commit everything for the cause, values, and ideas they've been tasked to defend. So God made a warrior. God said, and it'd have to be someone fearless and smart. Not smart in the way of learned men, but wise in the way of those who have truly lived. Whether you confront
not learned men,
grief and loss and overcome. So God made a survivor. God said, I need someone willing to create opportunities for hundreds to earn a living, provide for their families, do it all with honesty and integrity as the cornerstone. So God.
The Supreme Court said this is important, Paul. Be quiet.
And God said, most of all, I need someone who knows that you don't leave your comrades behind.
Mike Durant.
Is this a commercial?
Yes.
Mike Durant.
The whole thing?
Yes.
Who knows that the value of freedom and liberty are immeasurable. Who loves God, the Constitution, and America. I need someone who'll know that just by serving, they made their country proud. Who has nothing left to prove, but responds anyway, knowing the country he and his friends sacrificed everything for is in need. So God made a concern.
He can fly in a circle, I can tell you that much.
I heard the voice of the Lord saying, who shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here am I, send me. I'm asking the good people of Alabama to make me their next senator.
And it looks like he's leading a good bit right now.
No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed are greater than the legal services provided by other lawyers. I'm Harry Steele. You found the Backstory Podcast, number 125. I'm joined today by Mr. Paul Ripp down in Fairhope. How are you today, Mr. Ripp?
Patiently watching the longest intro we have ever had.
And Mr. Russian, how are things in Houston, Texas?
They're fine. It's a beautiful day, but I'm reminded of the movie Raising Arizona, where the movie went on for 31 minutes before they showed the title credits.
Well, it's so we had to get in there how awesome Mike Durant is. So 1819 News wrote an article this week. Outside money floods Alabama race for U.S. Senate.
Well, outside money has flooded every Alabama race there is for one thing or another forever. I don't know why Alabama seems to be easy pickings for candidates from other states, but it is.
I can tell you why it's easy pickings for candidates from other states. You've got a senator from Florida running for re-election and another senator from Senator wannabe from Connecticut doing that. And by God, you've got somebody in a political campaign that's being run out of Houston, Texas. I'm here to tell you, outside money floods the state of Alabama.
And if you want to go, if you want to get in the Wayback Machine and go hear some Mike Durant before he was a candidate, go listen to how he made all his money. This is a pretty interesting little podcast right here and just listening to the first 5 minutes, you get his bio, and it's like you said, not learned, not a man of letters, but a man of experience, I guess you'd say. And let's not forget
Eisenhower.
Yeah, so let's not forget that this guy was what all was he? Was he the commander of all forces during World War, or just European theater?
He was the commander of the European theater during World War II, and post World War II, he was the general of the Army, he was basically the Joint Chiefs Chairman.
I met him
before he ran for president.
I met him in 1957 in Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
So did
my dad was stationed there.
So his parting speech to us was not about nuclear weapons or abortion or anything like that. It was about the military-industrial complex. And actually, if you go watch this, it's a really awesome little video that they put together at the Library of Congress. They actually have drafts of the speech where he said congressional military-industrial complex. So, little tidbit there. If anybody wants to go check that out, it's really worth your time. So, you heard the intro about Citizens United and how Hillary, the movie, was the nexus of the decision, and how, there used to be a prohibition about spending campaign money within so many days of an election by corporations, and that is no longer the case. Obviously, $14 million has been spent so far in that Senate race.
It's totally out of whack now.
Okay, yeah. Well, think about this, Paul. Think about who has been a better friend to the military than the guy leaving that chair. Richard Shelby.
That's a good point.
Is the king of pork when it comes to military spending. Okay?
Undisputable king of pork.
Okay, so we get so we're just, I think we're covering the table here, because there's no question that Britt is a prototype of his, and Durant is. I mean, how does a guy go from flying a helicopter to being a multi-millionaire? Some guy from Connecticut is going to buy a Senate seat in Alabama.
Oh, hell, Harry, we're from the South. There's hundreds and hundreds of pilots who became millionaires in the 1980s doing nothing but flying airplanes.
Right.
Carol Baskin's husband.
And I'll tell you, and I'll tell you something that some people see that they like. And you know what that is? He's not from Alabama, because the people that are representing us now, we've just been backwards. We're not going anywhere. Nothing's going to change until you change candidates enough times to where finally you get some good ones.
Okay, so I
on
see,
any level.
Okay, so let me just be very clear. I don't know Mr. Durant. I've never heard him speak. I've seen a couple of his adverts and a few interviews like this. Right.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys know about Mike Durant?
I mean, I know the basic information about him. I can tell you he's not a terrible guy.
Black Hawk Down, et cetera.
The political machinations that expose the legal dealings of his family kind of paint him in a dark shadow, but, he doesn't seem like an awful person.
Okay. But you would agree that could you imagine anybody more cozy with the guys at the Pentagon than the guy who trains all of their pilots? Do you know that's what he does? He has an aviation related
right.
NASA sends pilots to Mike Durant's training camp.
He's got name recognition for sure in Washington. You can better bet.
Okay, so one of the promises that he's made is to build Trump's wall and overturn Roe versus Wade, something he couldn't possibly have anything to do with. And
there's two X's.
Right, but you just wait until you see this commercial. It's three things he can't possibly do, and those are the three things he's running on, okay? So let's talk a little bit about
Title. How you court the electorate in your state.
Well, let's talk about Title 42 for a second. Range, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to run it down?
Title 42 it's basically a management tool that says who you can turn back and who you can't. And Title 42 was created to say that we could just turn back anybody and everybody or detain them limitlessly.
But isn't it because of the plague?
Yes. No, it was part of Trump's anti-immigration agenda. And he used the COVID-19 fear in the beginning of the pandemic, which anyway, he used fear in the beginning of the pandemic to garner public support for this alongside the far right mindset of the majority that elected.
Okay, well, do you agree that there's a crisis at the border right now?
No.
Okay.
No.
U.S. encounters an unprecedented number of migrants. DHS says it's complicated.
I want to know what the precedent on migrants is, because they've been saying that every year since like 1973.
Right.
Okay, so y'all know how I like to make everything about me, right?
Yeah.
What? Really?
Yeah. Everything's always about me. Surprise,
You're
surprise.
one of the most selfless human beings I've ever met.
I understand
Out
that.
of all 4 human beings I know.
Exactly. So the Alabama 167th went over in World War I and stomped that rear end. And the reason they did that was, do you want to know why?
Why?
Because they'd been down in Mexico. They were the only soldiers that had any actual combat experience, because they've been down there fighting Pancho Villa on the Mexican border in 1917. So,
well, they weren't the only unit that did it. But
they weren't the only
unit.
unit. They were the unit from Alabama that got rolled into the Alabama 167th, and that's where my great-grandfather was. So, ain't nobody ever fixed the border, and nobody's going to. So, Paul, I'll let you take this one.
This is an article by Kyle Whitmire out of BirminghamAL.com, and this man is on death row, and Alabama officials seem to be okay with that. This is Toe Forrest Johnson and Adragas Ford. Both were accused of committing a murder. And of Mr. William Hardy. He was an off-duty policeman working in a motel there for security. Anyway, both of these men have had the support of the former Supreme Court Justice, Mr. Neighbors, Danny Carr, President Jefferson County District Attorney. I have a feeling that Jefferson County thing, too, might go to that. What was the name of the district attorney's unit we were talking about, Harry, that investigated already?
Public integrity, the integrity unit, yeah.
Yeah, the integrity unit. Even Bill Baxley's been behind it, but
conviction integrity unit, that's it.
Conviction integrity unit, yes. But Kay Ivey is very well aware of what is going on. And so is the Attorney General. And by the way, have you seen the Attorney General's beard there, Harry?
It's not as handsome as mine, is it?
And that latest thing. But anyway, Steve Marshall and Kay Ivey both people have been pleading with them to get in between this thing and pardon these people that are stuck in jail. The Mr. Ford, who they offered a plea deal at one time, refused to take it because he said he was not guilty. He died in prison. And Mr. Johnson is the remaining there. Hopefully somebody's going to do something. But
this sounds like some Lemony Snicket's crap to me, doesn't it? Do you, Raines? A
let
series
me
of unfortunate events.
Let me tell you, I read this case. I read the appeal brief, and if you think for 1 minute that our guy up in Holman is the only guy in jail for incorrectly, like, Murray Lawrence or Forrest Bowen, whoever, let me tell you a quick circumstances of this case.
Mm-hmm.
There were 2 men, Forrest Johnson and the other guy. They said they did it together. The DA alleged they did it together. They could not get the grand jury to return an indictment that had them together, so they represented it to the grand jury as 2 separate cases. All right?
Right.
2 separate capital murder cases. The evidence that DeForest was convicted on was a text message that he had sent in a group chat weeks prior to the murder that said he had shot somebody in the head. That was literally the prosecution's entire case, that he sent a text message that said he shot somebody, but the text message was sent weeks before the actual murder. And that man is on death row for that.
My God. My God. No, you're hearing somebody
who was the lead investigator?
Every week now you're hearing a case like this almost every week in the United States, somewhere in the States.
Listen, I think we should do a detective rating database where we go in these cases and we find out who the detective was and we give them a damn score.
They could just do Yelp.
Right.
For police departments.
Yelp for police departments. That's a great idea. So yes, sir.
Yeah, but what I was going to say in the case of Lawrence, Murray Lawrence, there was an investigation, but it produced nothing. That's what gets me. Is it? So, what kind of investigation do you have if it produces nothing? If it doesn't produce anything, how can you go forward?
That's because you're not interested in justice. You're interested in getting reelected.
I mean, God. I just don't get it.
Paula, that statement, that question you gave can literally be on the tombstone of people all across this country. And
I think you're getting to Whitmire's point here. Everybody knows this guy's innocent. What's he doing sitting on death row? You don't have enough evidence to convict him or to uphold the conviction. And, because it's election time for everybody, we want to look tough on crime, even on innocent people. Now, how the hell does that make any sense?
That's even more disgusting that the political position of these two is to let's get it over with me getting in office first, and then maybe I'll do something. Come on, man. Anyway, that's probably what the hell's going to happen.
Speaking of come on, man, they're going to do the poison pill thing, right, Raines? Issue a bunch of shares.
It's not going to happen. There's no way.
Good. I like Twitter to be divisive and hateful.
He likes to play games, though.
Yeah, the billionaire.
Yeah, he's known for this.
Billions.
He's known for this, doing shit that affects tons of people, and then he just gets a kick out of doing it.
Yeah. So
that's why they're telling him to stop talking about the company.
So I found one article about this. The state of Alabama awarded a contract to construct a new male prison facility in Elmore County to Cattle Construction in Montgomery. Cattle is a major government contractor and does large volume of work for U.S. State Department, the Department of Energy, the Bureau of Prisons, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and all branches of the U.S. military. Sounds like they might have had an inside track on this thing. What do you think, boys?
Definitely. I didn't hear anything out for bid or whatnot, but nothing's going to surprise me.
God bless the
billion
contract.
That's it.
Billions. Okay, so I don't want to get into too much of this, but there's a really good series on the New York Times website, How Did Disney Carve Out Its Own Government in Florida? Well, It's kind of like, how is it that a new gaming establishment opened this week in Greene County?
Yeah, they carved that out, didn't they?
Right.
Made it work.
You make your own little fiefdom, and you create your own government, and you install your own people, and you do whatever you want. And that was Disney had a lawyer, and he goes, well, this is what I want to do. How do I do it? And he said, your only impediment here is democracy. No kidding. You need to go read this article, Raines. It's awesome.
Well, what they did, actually, the Mennonites have done all through Central America. They've made those same type of concessions with governments, like in Belize and Guatemala.
Yeah, we just outbreed them. We move there and outbreed them. Take over.
No, man, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being their own community, providing their own police, fire, emergency, collecting some taxes, etc.
Well, and to be fair,
it's probably going to be pretty hard to reverse that, don't you think?
Well, no. What Disney has done as far as carving out its own government, it's not the same as what you're talking about. What Disney did when they were building this was put themselves in their own special tax zone. Okay? And that's what they mean by carving out their own government. They're still regulated. You can't murder anybody. Right. do any of that. The Constitution still applies in Disney World. It's not like the Seminole Tribe of Florida.
But they don't have to go to the county to get a building permit. They can get there. They can build whatever they want. It's a special tax
exclusion zone. And the thing that a lot of people don't understand about Disney is that they have multiple contract exclusion zones all around their sites, because as they added them, the stuff that was grandfathered in on the others, they weren't eligible for. So all the expansions, like Epcot Center, is not under the same tax law as the Magic Kingdom. And I'm not talking about sales tax or any of that. I'm talking about how they pay federal and state sales tax.
And here's another thing you probably realized if you've been there before. They control, like, you can't just go build a DoubleTree at Disney. You got to have a contract. Exactly. You got to be in bed with Disney, and then you got to call it the Minnie Mouse Palace or something.
Yeah, that's why
they control every aspect.
There's a place in Orlando called the Orange Blossom Trail, which is quite possibly number 2 behind the Strip in Panama City or the main gate entrance outside Fort Sill, as like just one of the seediest places in the country. And it's one of the few places in Orlando that is not part of the Disney exclusion zone. So it's full of flea bag motels and strip joints and everything else. And it's like, it's really its own little republic down there, because even the mayor of Orlando are like, I don't go down to the OBT. I stay out of that spot. It's the wretched hive of scum and villainy.
So remember the auditors came in to Brookside, Alabama, and found all these problems and everything. Well, there is
missing a few guns.
Yeah, might have been missing a few things. So anyway, Archibald has and the folks at AL.com have come up with a new, I guess, little documentary.
Yeah.
Pulled under, and it's all about these people, failing to appear, missing a court date, then you lose your driver's license, and then you can't ever pay off your fines and fees. And so anyway, it's well worth your time to go watch that. We'll link it below when we load the video up.
I'm gonna make a note of that.
And it's just more of what we talked about last week in the Tower of Babel Atlantic article. And so Raines, I guess the last folks holding out in Maripol are giving up, or they're surrounded, or...
Well, let me just do a quick rundown of what's happened this week. If you go back to that last graphic, if you look down at... There, perfect. If you look down at Mariupol, the city has been besieged for quite some time, and the last holdouts were... and I double underline this, a very public showing of about a quarter company worth of Marines and civilians that were holed up at a steel plant. Now, this steel plant is not like Union Carbide up in Pittsburgh. This steel plant is basically the size of 3 or 4 large shopping malls, and it's huge. And they were holed up along with a couple hundred civilians in the basement of a building. And the Russian army was just basically rolling around them and leaving it as a point of resistance. But it's become so public because social media and everything else that the Russian army finally said, what we're going to do is kind of level the steel plant on top of them. And that'll be the end of this broadcast bullshit. What the Russian army has shifted their tactics and their strategy to is creating a land bridge all the way to the Crimea through the Donbass, where it says Russian-backed, separatist-controlled right there. If you go down through Mariupol to Melitopol and on to Kherson, that creates a land bridge to the Crimea.
That's okay, well, isn't it more of a rail line? Aren't they trying to...
It's a supply line, yes.
Line,
and what this does is it drastically modifies their war goals, and they can say, okay, pull a George Bush, mission accomplished, and pull out before things get worse. So once that is established and they establish a government in the Donbass, that area from Kharkiv, that whole crescent will become an autonomous zone that will be annexed by Russia within the next year. But I do believe that we are going to stop seeing Russian advances in the northern part of the country and in the northeast part of the country.
He's going to settle for the South.
Right.
Well, those 155s that they're getting are going to be doing some damage. I can tell you that.
Oh, yeah. So 80.9 million infected in the U.S. with SARS-CoV-2 with 991,245 deaths.
Damn.
Whole bunch of people. Still don't know about Dr. Scott Harris, if he pulled out, but I'm sure he did just fine. And this past week, I was on News Talk 93.1, and that young lady's name was April Marie, and you can go check that out. They upload their podcast to their website.
And how many things did you tell April that she was not aware of?
Well, she didn't know that my opponent used to be a Democrat. She didn't know he was appointed by Don Siegelman. She didn't know he was, had been suckling from the government teat for since 2003. And she didn't know that he was a Obama delegate.
PAC on PAC money.
Oh, and she didn't know about the PAC on PAC money, which, of course, nobody knows about because only 2 people wrote articles about it. So, Paul, it's time for the Rip Report, but I'm going to hijack it for just a minute. Well, no, I'll let you go first. Gun violence become leading cause of death.
One of the main article in Lanyap, those of you that don't get any printed material anymore, buying any papers, you ought to try the Lanyap. It's free on newsstands, or you can get a subscription online. The main article, there's a lot of great articles in there. This goes to looking at politics as well in the state, Mobile, and Baldwin County. But, 420, the celebration, it shows cannabis moving to mainstream. The article's High Times. It's by Dale Leash. Anyway, they're discussing the some of the existing marijuana laws that medical marijuana, that is, laws that the problems that are already arising, which Harry can talk to. But what I found interesting about it, again, is the some people trying to decriminalize it. And Mayor Sandy Simpson was one of them that said it should be a small fine. And several others said that it should be a small fine.
Hey, Paul, can I stop for a second? Because I think the city of Mobile is one of the places where they no longer take you into custodial arrest for small amounts of marijuana. They write you a ticket, just like they pulled you over for speeding, and they say, show up for court. Quite different than how you'd be treated over here in Baldwin County. You agree?
Well, Keith Blackwood, the one who is running in the DA's office, he says, and he thinks that he stands on this position. Our office has partnered with the drug court for over 30 years, and I'm on the committee right now to modernize it and make it even better. So I think we have to prosecute the small stuff, or what some consider to be small stuff, in order to prevent major violent crime. I think it's very important tool to help prevent overall crime. And I think in places where decriminalization has been implemented, you've seen a rise in crime. That's not particularly true. And it goes contrary to just giving them a ticket or whatnot. But let's look at the money angle that's mentioned in there. In Colorado, which legalized recreational marijuana use in 2012, and recreational sales in 2014, the state collected $423 million in sales tax on THC products from that year. And the industry employs 35,000 people. Slightly less populated Oregon, where recreational sales were legalized in 2015, there the state collected some $178 million in taxes on marijuana products, and there's several thousand that are in the industry working there. I can't remember the number of states. I believe it's like 17 or 18 now that are decriminalized it. But it is, it's the same thing with the lottery or anything like that. It's going to linger in front of us and our legislators for years, and we'll probably be the last ones to implement anything. And that'll be at a point to where we're forced to, because every state around us has different laws. So, that's a same old story right there. But hopefully the medical marijuana will get through and start being available to a lot of people, because I can tell you it does work. I think you're going to see most marijuana products going to edibles, to tell you the truth. And the other thing too, Harry, you and I have had this conversation. My point on the marijuana use is that you'll see statistics that are anywhere from 15 to 30% of people are using for recreational purposes smoking marijuana, right? Okay, let's take Baldwin County's 225,000 last census, and let's say we'll take the lowest denominator and go with only 10% and say that it's 22,000 people in Baldwin County are smoking on a regular basis marijuana. And you know as well as I do, that is, I bet you it's every bit of 50,000 or more. So how do you enforce something where you have such a large population, participating in something that's illegal? And to add more a complex issue, every single gas station in Baldwin County is selling essentially paraphernalia for an illegal product. So I don't see how you could take somebody to court without that coming up like, well, you're selling the papers over here, you're selling the wraps over here, and on the way out, you can get a single beer that's been iced down.
I sure hope they call me and don't take legal advice from you, Mr. Rip. So
I'm not giving legal advice.
So let's
I'm certainly not giving that. They'd love for me to be giving legal advice. No, I'm not at all.
Okay, so let's talk about this Guardian article. Shocking statistic: gun violence becomes leading cause of death among U.S. youth, data shows.
Right.
A 30% increase in firearm-related deaths between 2019 and 2020, including incidents of suicide and accidental shooting. Okay, so we're not saying it's just violent. We're saying they died by the gun. And so, anyway, some more information you can find there. But, Raines, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about these numbers here. You guys see this right here, right? Motor vehicle crashes was the leading cause of death for a while.
Well, it has been for almost ever.
Yeah. Well, since they invented a horse, I guess, or a buggy.
Right.
And then suffocation, heart disease, drowning, fire burning, chronic respiratory disease. Anyway, really, really shocking. Raines, did you want to talk to these?
Let me read the first sentence and you pick up from there, Raines.
Okay.
In 2020, 4,357 children aged 1 to 19, or about 6 in 100,000, died from gun-related injuries, the researchers report, slightly exceeding the number for automobile accidents, 3,913, and greatly exceeding deaths caused by suffocation, 1,411, or drowning of 966. Right?
Yeah, it's what you're seeing here, and to give it credit, this was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. And when Paul first called my attention to this article, I read it and distilled the information and just did a quick rundown of statistics and was really shocked to see that it is actually true. Now, one of the things that needs to be said is the metric that's used to measure this is not children ages 1 to 5. This is children ages 1 to 19 years old. So this uptick in gun violence is not a bunch of fifth graders being killed, because Lord knows we've had enough in the last few years, but it calls in all of the 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and that's where the majority of that subset lies. But if you'll notice, there is a direct correlation to drug overdose and poisoning. And these two upticks, to me, signal yet again the failed policy of the war on drugs. It shows that gun violence is going up, as is drug overdoses going up, and it's because we still have this ridiculous war on drugs. And the ineffective way that it's been managed, that it's been executed, and how it's been legislated has led to this. One thing I wanted to mention is that if you look back to 1999 on this graph, you'll see that the deaths per 100,000 children and adolescents was at nearly 4.5, which was pretty much a baseline for how it was to 2017. We started seeing the slow crawl up the strain. If you go further back and start this at 1979, you would notice that the gun violence and the drug and overdose and poisoning lines were much higher to account for the introduction of crack cocaine into the U.S. market. So we had done a good job of pushing those down to a degree, but here we are seeing a radical uptick because there are states that are legalizing certain drugs and decriminalizing certain narcotics. And most importantly, they are reviewing and modifying and retraining their police to handle drug cases differently. The war on drugs is a failed state, and it needs to stop now.
Well, it certainly enriches those willing to deal in contraband as opposed to people trying to make a
absolutely
honest living. And I want to say one thing, Paul. Not being a drug guy or anything like that, but I did grow up here in Baldwin County, and I'll guarantee you, if I picked up the phone and called Tommy Chong and I said, "Tommy, have you ever heard of Alberta Kush?" And he'd go, "Yeah, I remember smoking. Man, I've been smoking that stuff since '66. Where's it come from?" Alberta, Alabama, Baldwin County, Alabama, the same place where they've been growing it since 1966. Now, you tell me, Paul Rip, how can some guy that doesn't do drugs know about something that's been growing here for 40 years?
Well,
and everybody in America knows about it.
I know that years ago there was a statistic out that said that I think it was Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and I can't remember the other state. Every single one of them's most valuable cash crop was the illegal crop of marijuana.
Okay, so
every single state.
Did you see that the Alabama Democratic Party has now launched a new cannabis legalization website? So, of course, now that the Democrats
weed
have picked up the mantle, it'll be off limits for any Republicans.
It's off limits for any Republican anyway.
It's not off limits for me. I think there's I think there's a way to do this and not and it not be generational wealth for the politically corrupt.
If they can't pass a lottery, Harry, there's very little chance of waiting on this to be decriminalized.
Okay, so the city of Gulf Shores moves forward with major road public safety projects amid rapid growth. This includes a pedestrian bridge over 181 and all that good stuff. So look for traffic snarls and all kinds of inconvenience when you try to go to the beach this summer. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and we're going to watch another video because it is both instructive and damn hilarious. Are you ready for this, Paul?
Yeah.
There's a great deal of excitement over the launch at ICW, and with good reason. The 40-plus acre park will fill a big need for the growing number of boaters using our waters. The $17 million project is all but complete, but there's a problem. The ramps aren't level. They lean, causing one side of the trailer to be higher than the other.
I think it will create a problem, and the problem being the more boaters you have here, the more problem you're going to have getting in and out.
The issue is making it hard for people to get their boats onto the trailer straight, particularly with larger boats, pontoons, or catamarans. The problem is these are visible, and some boats had issues while we were there.
Now, wait a second. It wasn't the parking lot or the pier, but the actual ramp itself. The whole purpose for this $17 million apparatus is a total screw-up.
Aware of the problem and is already working with all parties involved in the build to get it fixed.
Us and the design engineers all went down yesterday and looked at it. The design engineers are back down there today taking some further
I'd hate to be you.
Investigations, and we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Well, hell, me and Raines could have figured it out.
Or if enough users will have issues
look at that.
Fix.
Look at
Boaters
that.
I spoke with today say it's
That's a
pretty
big
obvious
difference.
and hope something will be done.
The boat will not go under straight. If there's any current or wind blowing, you might have to try 3 or 4 times to get it back on there.
How big a problem is this?
We're investigating that to try to figure out exactly how bad that is.
Investigating.
And what kind of, are these just, minor issues, or are these major issues that need to be addressed?
Well, there's two
Now, whatever fix needs to be made, I'm told the county will not be paying for it. I did speak with the contractor today in charge of the construction here. They tell me they're aware of the problem. They followed the design to the letter, they say, and we'll be working with the county and the design engineer to rectify any problems. Now, meanwhile, this should not interfere with the ribbon cutting ceremony scheduled for next Thursday. Reporting live in Orange Beach, Hal Sherritt, Fox 10 News.
I say we go down there and stick a boat just right there on the ramp, and just where you can't get it in or out, like an Austin Powers moment.
Three takeaways from that. One, and I've held this to be true since I was a child. Nobody knows more about how to get your boat on the trailer than the guy on the dock holding a beer.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Two, anybody with a boat and a trailer and a truck worth their salt can get a boat on the trailer straight regardless of the ramp. I used a ramp that used to be a freaking landing craft station from World War II at the Gravelines Bayou boat launch in Jackson County, Mississippi, where if you backed it in too much, your trailer wheels would get hung in the mud.
Yep.
And I'm here to tell you, I could get my skiff up every time.
We had a picnic table.
Ability.
We had a picnic tabletop that we shoved off in the water. And
The third thing is this shit is never going to get fixed. Because the contractor is going to say, I followed the design to the letter. The county is going to say, we designed it and you should have known better. And it's going to be tied up in court for 20 years. And the only thing that's going to come out of this is that the people that use it are going to get better about launching and forwarding their boats in and out of the water because of it. That's it.
Yep.
Well, it seems like there would have been a grading plan below the water line.
There was a plan. They followed the plan. It's just that it appears the plan was not right.
Yeah, well, there's a big shocker. So 2 Alabama rivers are named among the 10 most endangered in the country. Guess what number 2 is?
Which one?
Mobile River, because of the pile of coal ash that they've decided to cap in place.
Right.
Yeah. And
they say it's perfectly safe.
And in some other news, I bet you this building doesn't have a damn square corner in it. ADM is breaking ground on a new field office in Mobile so they can sit around and drink coffee and do nothing all day.
The Alabama Department of Environmental Maniacs.
I don't know what they do.
I've never known them to do anything. Anything. Seriously. Anything. We called them in Fairhope for years, and they never did a damn thing.
So the Department of Agriculture came down and shut down the Walmart gas station, the Murphy USA in Fairhope, because they were poisoning everybody with water in their gas.
My daughter told me that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Paul. So any word on the new plan for the old folk roller coaster?
So I don't know what's going to happen down at the
there it is.
Listen, I tell you what the sad part about this is. They had an original plan that was vetted very well during the last administration, and they had a very good plan. It's just that the election just made it stumble. People came up with all this stuff about the damn bluff and whatnot, whatever. But the sad part about every bit of it is every time that they have to go back to the designers and the people to redo this thing and come up with this, it's costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'd like to know how much since it was in the 11th hour during the last election, how much in the last 18 months we have spent on redesign and redesign. And I got a feeling when all of this is over with, people are going to go down there and they're going to look and say, this is $6.2 million, you know, and not understand. But you'll be able to wheel your wheelchair into that open car, because they're going to go with the open car on a track rather than the slip and slide. I thought the slip and slide was a much better idea.
Okay, I want to do some rapid fire stuff real quick. Alabama to observe Confederate Memorial Day on Monday. State offices will be closed. So that is a reprieve for us attorneys. Today is the last day of the 37th annual Interstate Mullet Toss at the Floribama. Not that Mr. Rip
has 3 days.
It was 3 days. Okay. And,
that thing was blocked off from all the way from the bridge all the way to the state line. You couldn't park anywhere.
My head still hurts from the last time I went to one, so I still haven't forgotten.
Yeah.
I won't be back.
Everyone needs
soon.
to experience it at least once.
So there was a social media spat in Tuscaloosa that led to gunplay. Did you hear about this? Haycourt Apartments. Anyway, sounds typical. Bunch of teenagers, blah, blah, blah. And there's a Bessemer man who, Rolando Williamson. Raines, you ever heard of the Kingpin Law? It's under, let me think of what it is. OCDEF, the Organized Crime, blah, 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 blah.
I've heard of it. I'm not familiar with it, though.
Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. And so anyway, they caught this guy, and anyhow, you could just imagine 366 grams of heroin, 109 grams of cocaine, 573 grams of meth, 52 kilos of marijuana, over 97,000 in cash, multiple firearms, and 1,700 rounds of ammo. That, my friends, will you will be the damn kingpin, and we will prosecute you as such.
God, it's going to take a couple years just to figure out the legal quagmire what to charge you with.
Oh, they got him. So May 27th, just a reminder, snapper season comes in. And
I'm ready to get on a six-pack. Anybody knows anybody out there with a six-pack running during that time? I got 3 people that'll go.
I hear you. So speaking of reasons maybe not to eat the fish close to shore, ADM is having a public hearing for the privately owned Baldwin County Sewer Service. They're seeking to expand their capacity of their Fort Morgan water treatment plant. And, of course, the Little Lagoon Preservation Society and other folks are up in arms about it, but I'm sure they will lose this fight too.
Well, they've done a good job at public participation on that, and you might be surprised, and I think that every bit of scrutiny should be on Baldwin County Sewer, because we've seen 2 cases that they're involved in that were nothing short of fraud.
Well, the principals in the companies, yes, that's right.
Right.
And so anyway, still no resolution to this political blame game that's going on down here between the courts and the city officials in Mobile. And,
as well as Baldwin County.
And as well as Baldwin County. And then, of course, I haven't heard anything else. I haven't seen a memorandum or anything out of AOC saying when or how we're going to start this implementation of making municipal courts use aliquot. Yeah. And I guess everybody knows that Mr. Brooks is on the ropes, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, as many predicted, Trump was going to run him over, and that's exactly what he did.
And then we have Governor Ivy and her ridiculous commercials. Have you seen the new I Like It commercial, Raines? It ain't bad.
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
I have. I mean, you know, it's just an embarrassment. I don't know what to say other than that.
And of course,
why we're the butt of jokes.
And now she's done an about face and says, "Oh, of course, the election was stolen from President Trump."
Completely about face.
And so, Paul, I wanted to give you one more run at the Murray Lawrence project. Tell us what's going on.
Well, we're still working on that. The .com site is set up. deal-with-the-devil.com, and the Facebook page of which is a blog, Deal with the Devil blog, and that will link you to the petition, as well as now I think we have the entire transcript on there, and a lot of other cases that have happened in Baldwin County. But right now we're working on the habeas corpus, and we're trying to find a couple of people that are involved, and we're still trying to just unwind the whole thing. I think I'm going to be trying to contact some people that are influential in this Tofaris Johnson case that we just discussed. But now we are going to try to do the best that we can to really shine a light on what's going on. I believe there's over 350 signatures already on the petition. So you're going to hear more about that. And what I was wanting to do, Harry, was maybe do a series of mini podcasts exclusively on this, where maybe the three of us, like, say, take volume 1, we read it, and then we do a little short podcast on 1, then we go to 2, and we do it like that all the way through. But we can get back on that later. We can talk about that later.
All right. Well, I still haven't heard if this $333 million that the Pritchard Water Board applied for has been granted or not. All I know is that there was a press conference saying that they had applied, and of course we won't hear anything for some time until indictments start coming down in this Pritchard Water Board case. You guys,
and it is low-hanging fruit.
It is low-hanging fruit. All right,
it is low-hanging fruit that they're going after the water board, which, you know, they were just so careless and reckless. But what about Mr. Albritton and some of the white-collar crime and the political corruption, you know?
Well, this is political corruption and white-collar crime.
It is political corruption, but what I'm saying, it is low-hanging fruit. It was there just for the picking. They didn't have to do anything. Really, all they have to do is read Lanyard, because they've been doing a pretty good job of investigating all this stuff.
So, Raines, what do you have on your radar? What's
the
next
French
thing?
election of Emmanuel Macron? Marie Le Pen lost with a much smaller margin of defeat than she did the last 4 times she's run, which signals another right-wing shift in France. Of course, the Alsace-Lorraine crowd stays right, as does the Riviera. But Le Pen is also extremely anti-NATO and pro-Putin, so the amount of people that voted for her was a lot more than the last time. And Macron's victory spells a bit of another political climate shift in Europe that I watch with bated breath.
How about you?
For everybody in South Alabama, Europe's that funny-looking country that's next to Russia.
How about you, Mr. Rip? What you got going on?
Well, I think the citizens of the United States are not really taking the Ukraine thing as serious as they should be, because God knows where this is going, you know. But and that's why Europe is so worried right now. Who was it? Finland and Switzerland are now applying for NATO.
Finland and Sweden.
Sweden. Yeah. So you're seeing people jump on board now saying, hey, we can't face this by ourselves. But I agree with Raines. I think that militarily what they're going to do is Putin wants to be able to get to the south, to the sea, cut off sea access to Ukraine, which will cripple them, and go from there. And I think that's what's happening.
I bet the price of shrimp goes up if they can't get to the
shrimp. You won't be able to get anything out of there, man.
Here's our outro.
I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell.
This speech did not get very much attention. When a new president is coming to power, as John Kennedy was, the spotlight was not on Dwight Eisenhower.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions.
There was a feeling at the time that this must have been written by some speechwriter who just sneaked into the speech.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
3 months ago, we got contacted by a family.
Did every cameraman back then have Parkinson's reins? Why is it that all these old movies are like, handheld? I'm sorry about that.
Up in Minnesota, saying that we have documents from Malcolm Moose. He was responsible in part for drafting the military-industrial complex.
The papers give us written evidence that this was not just some caprice of Eisenhower's or something by some speechwriter.
You see the evolution of his speech from May 1959 to 1961.
And he wanted to give this speech for a long time, 2 years.
Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea.
There was one person in Dwight Eisenhower's life whom he really confided almost everything to, and that was his brother Milton.
There's one particular document where the speechwriters had already drafted their version of the speech, only to see Milton come along and totally revamp what had already been written.
When Milton Eisenhower was taking notes and writing things on the drafts of these speeches, the speechwriters knew that it wasn't Milton talking, it was Ike.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
He would see magazines with advertisements for some new warplane or some bomb, and he got so angry he'd take the magazine and throw it into the fireplace of the Oval Office because he felt that defense spending should not be something that would be encouraged by companies who are seeking commercial gain.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
There is an interesting document. It shows that the farewell speech would be made to Congress. But yet, President Eisenhower decided, no, he was going to address the people.
Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
One test of how well a president speaks is how long the speech lives. Here we are 50 years later, we're still talking about this speech.
Now, on Friday noon, I am to become a private citizen. I am proud to do so. I look forward to it. Thank you, and good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Raines.
Good night, gang.
Good night, Harry.
Good night, John.
And good night to everybody in Baldwin County.